We've just reviewed the grid-scale solar and energy storage industry. Now we'll shift our focus to the behind-the-meter installations. Changing state policies and rate-making cases like California's Net Energy Metering 3.0 have caused a seismic shift in the distributed solar market. I'm Ryan Kennedy, editor at PV Magazine USA, and welcome back to the PV Magazine Roundtables US. In this session, we'll discuss these recent policy changes, as well as emerging policies, and understand their impact on the market. We'll review the California market and learn how it may serve as an example for other states with a high penetration of distributed solar and storage. All this now in our panel discussion. We're joined today by 4 expert panelists. From Aurora Solar, a leading solar and design sales platform provider, we're joined by Chief Revenue Officer Carina Brockl. Carina has over 20 years of experience in cloud technologies, including previous roles at SAP AG and Salesforce.com. Our second panelist, California Solar and Storage Association Executive Director Bernadette Del Chiaro. CALSSA is the state's leading clean energy business group and a leading force in the rate making for the distributed solar industry. And joining us from Sonnen, Inc. is Chairman and Chief Executive Officer Blake Richetta. Sonnen is a leader in home battery solutions. And from leading residential solar and storage installer Sunrun, we're joined by Walker Wright, Vice President of Public Policy. Walker served as Sunrun's Western Policy Lead from 2011 to 2016. And we'll start off with Walker today, but first, thanks panelists for being with us today. Appreciate it. We'll start off with the question for Walker. How has net metering helped launch some of the major U.S. residential solar markets to date?
Great to be here, everyone. It's an honor to be serving with this panel, and I look forward to this discussion. I think net metering is a foundational policy that has led to the growth of behind-the-meter solar and behind-the-meter solar storage in a number of U.S. states. And we just have to remember that it was always a combination of federal tax credits, local state rebates or SRECs, and also net metering that sort of led over time to the value proposition, that and eventually got us to where we are today with higher levels of penetration, which is still low compared to some of the leading behind-the-meter solar markets around the world. I think that's important to point out. But I think, and Bernadette can touch on this, like initially the California Solar Initiative provided rebates on top of what was net metering that led to investment that provided an entry for companies like Sunrun. So it was initially the policies that drove investment into the market, and net metering was a major component of that because investors, customers, solar companies all understood that concept of the meter running backwards, of the electrons either being consumed on site or going out to the grid for the neighbor to consume, where that neighbor would then be paying the utility for that power. So I think that metering really helped drive the market, and we should definitely acknowledge that.
Thank you. And for Bernadette, what has happened to the California market since NEM 3.0, the latest iteration, has gone into effect?
Yeah, I think the best way to sum it up is we are closer to where we should be than we actually are. California has built really the envy of the country, if not the world, in terms of the largest renewable energy market in California is distributed. And yet what we have just done to the marketplace is not just a seismic shift. If you call it that, that's sort of like what the earthquake has been doing to places around the world. We are looking at an 80% drop in sales under the new NBT tariff, with the signs of the months ahead looking darker and dimmer, not brighter. And a lot of companies are honestly looking at whether or not they're going to be able to keep the doors open in the months ahead. So these are very dark times, very difficult. We essentially have made solar and batteries more expensive, and we're asking customers to spend, in some cases, twice as much money for half the value. it is a very hard sale unless you're specialized in a niche market of, selling to sort of wealthy Californians that might be a little NEM proof. For the mainstream market, which is where we were seeing our greatest growth and greatest penetration, we're seeing signs of major problems. And I want to emphasize what Walker just said. California has built the largest renewable energy market in the distributed section. We can't meet our clean energy goals without distributed generation. But even that market is just the start. We're only at about 12% penetration of ratepayers in California compared to, say, Australia, that is more than twice that. So we have a long way to go. This is not the time to be pulling back.
Thank you. And for Carina, sudden market changes like the one that we've had here can pose challenges for communicating to customers. How are companies like Aurora and installers that they work with, how are they delivering the message of value of rooftop solar when there are sudden changes like NEM 3.0?
Yes, of course. So I think I want to first emphasize that we have very different installers in the market. So it comes from really servicing really local, regional, but also national needs. And so installers come from many different backgrounds. And hence the first route really for the way we think through it is making sure that we educate. We educate really well. We stay on top of policy. We understand the policies very well. And then we make sure that we bring that out to our installers. And then the second part, this is where Aurora really fits in, is through technology. And what we mean by that is we want to make sure that installers really can model exactly how a system will react, and especially with changes in policy, so that installers can have really the most accurate kitchen table conversation with the customer, and then really showing solar's true value here, and while creating strong trust within their region. So it's all about giving the right tools and the right accuracy at the right moment in that conversation with the homeowner. And then I'll say another thing also here, and this is a bit more broader and a larger trend. Of course, so energy prices are still increasing, and I'm just going to cite what the Bureau of Labor Statistics here says. And if you look at 2022, we still had an increase in the prices of energy that are double of the inflation. So the cost of energy is going up and still continuing to go up. So making sure that our installers are able to also articulate that very well, I think is very important.
Thank you. And for Blake, Sonnen has its roots in Germany, where a comparable policy transition had occurred, where feed-in tariffs were reduced or removed. How did the industry in Germany respond and rebound from this kind of policy change?
Great question. Yeah, so many of you may be familiar with the Energiewende, which is the overarching German energy transition plan. And within Energiewende, there's the famous Erneuerbare Gesetz, which is the framework that we would call net metering in this country, but of course is really around the feed-in tariff. And yeah, I mean, basically the Erneuerbare Gesetz initially created this massive solar market with a 200% of retail feed-in tariff. So this was really just a financial proposition for people to put solar on any roof and to inject as much of it into the grid as they wanted. And this over time became untenable for the German energy system. And they started to see the exact same change that many markets see around the world, and California is going through as well. The behind the meter residential energy storage market in Germany is still the largest in the world. And it was birthed not because of backup power at all. In fact, the opposite, but because of the need. Once the Erneuerbare started to change and the feed-in tariff started to be reduced, similar to net metering changing in California, eventually, of course, the feed-in tariffs changed all the way to, in many parts of Germany, 0, or you can even be fined for injecting a kilowatt hour in Germany now. And so there was a market need to harness solar and harmonize it with grid operations, optimize it, and certainly to transform an intermittent form of renewable generation into something that's firm and dispatchable. I mean, that literally created the energy storage market in Germany. When I was at Tesla in 2016 with trying to launch the first Powerwall, we were looking at Sonnen and how this German company had been doing this already for 6 years. And we started in the innovation process started 2008, the first product in 2010. So behind the meter residential storage in this country, with all due respect, in 2010 was nothing really, except for the small off-grid business. So there's quite a bit of knowledge and experience from this. And again, it had nothing to do with backup power at all. So it's an interesting benchmark. In fact, 97% of our 140,000 batteries in Germany don't even do backup power. They don't even have a grid forming inverter. They've always been for harnessing solar, harmonizing it, and swarm controlling it, and basically transforming that renewable generation into something that's firm and dispatchable and can be used for as a grid asset for grid services. So there's quite a bit of experience there. And we're very proud to have the largest VPP in Europe now, but it's not about Sonnen, it's about all the companies that are into this. So to answer your question, what happened? Well, it was difficult, very difficult for the solar industry when Erneuerbare Energiegesetz went through its first layers of change. And there were a lot of companies that didn't make it. There was contraction. And then when the industry emerged, it emerged as an industry that was extremely focused on trying to make the solar array and the battery work and monetize a little differently, both responding to price signals and rate structures very precisely, but also performing dynamic grid services that earn cash. And this became literally a fundamental piece of the model. So I guess in conclusion, it can work, and it has worked. It's just an interesting benchmark. It has worked in Germany. The solar industry is quite strong. If you went to Smarter E, which is the European version of RE Plus in Munich this year, you know how successful it is. It's a massive show, much larger than RE Plus, and the industry is thriving, but it is a different sort of industry than what existed in the heyday of solar only and rooftop solar, which would have been the earlier part of the century.
Thank you. Yeah, it sounds like the motivation behind it was to support a more flexible and resilient grid, to have more energy storage, but 80% drop in one year or in a couple quarters for installations, maybe that was not the intent, or I should hope was not the intent of the CPUC. So Bernadette, do you see this as something that was too much too fast, or what's your reaction to this outcome and how steeply the value of net metered energy dropped off?
Yeah, absolutely. There's no question that this was a reckless decision that is causing unnecessary pain. There's nobody that wants to see that transition to that vision that, Blake just laid out than CALSSA and our member companies. We are the ones that have been pushing the policies that would bring about that kind of advanced distributed energy future. But let me give you an example of what's happening right now in California. In terms of the commission just basically sent the industry over a cliff without a parachute. So, for example, there was a proceeding that was open at the Public Utilities Commission in California to explore dynamic pricing. So pricing that could really drive not just solar and storage, but also electrification. Things that are really well-known tools to give consumers the right price signals and the right incentives to come along with us down this path where we want to go of more advanced clean energy. And instead of proceeding with that conversation, the commission basically gut and amended that proceeding and replaced it with the bluntest tool possible, which is high fixed charge conversation that is underway right now in California. It's sort of like the solar tax part 2. The commission is considering solar a fixed charge on all residential customers that right now on the table that PG&E and the other utilities have presented is 5 times the national average. We are actually going in the opposite direction of Germany. We're going in the opposite direction of where we need to go. And the last thing I'll point out is it is 2023. We as humans on this planet are in a very different place. We know we need in California alone 180 gigawatts of renewable energy, and we needed that yesterday. We're supposed to be building 6 gigawatts a year. We're falling behind every single year. And we just threw the most, growth-oriented, biggest renewable energy market over a cliff. If what we really wanted was that vision Blake pointed out, painted for us, which we all do, making this blunt change and throwing a lot of companies over a cliff was not the way to do it. And having no parachute or no policy in place to drive that future is, I think, revealing of where, a lot of the political forces are in California right now.
Thank you. And for Walker, one way that we see companies looking to drive more value is by having a wider set of technologies that are being embraced by installers. Could you talk a little bit about that sort of wider set of technologies that companies like Sunrun are beginning to bring into their network and facilitate better use of energy and more value for a homeowner?
Absolutely. And I first just want to reiterate, I think Bernadette's point. We went to the Munich show this past June. We've been following a lot of the trends in Europe for some time. And I think that as a company, we've been talking about the value of solar plus storage. Before the new NBT tariff, we were the leading company attaching the most storage in California and across the US. I think that the challenge is that we need to break up pro net metering or the net metering conversation against distributed generation in general, which will be solar plus storage. And I think that what Bernadette is mentioning is that there needed to be a path for us to get to that high attachment rate across the industry, and just look at it from a city perspective or an interconnection perspective. When you're quickly asking everyone to go from installing very little batteries to saying that there's less of a value proposition without the batteries, a lot of companies aren't making it. Customers are confused, and more importantly, the infrastructure isn't there in the short term to be able to attach all of those batteries and to meet customer demand. So I think that that's definitely part of this story, and I think that when we are looking forward, it really has to be about, to your point, the overall DER electrification household. Right. So when we fast forward, it's not going to be about the solar system or even the solar plus battery system. It's going to be really about how that customer is getting a suite of options that are in their home that tie the EV in the garage to the battery, to the solar, and other electrification products, including, ovens or heat pumps, et cetera. That's really how we're trying to look at it. And we're also noticing more and more that those are the questions that customers are asking about. So it really becomes about the overall value proposition. And again, to Bernadette's point, blunt instruments like extremely high fixed charges that discourage, simply put, smart energy use are not a direction, not for California, but any state or any nation around the world to go in. And again, we're following rate design in all the states in which we operate, 23 states, with dozens and dozens of utility service territories there. We're also following the patterns around the world where there is DG penetration, whether it's Australia, Germany, et cetera. And we really need to be careful that we're measuring what the value proposition is that continues to lead to non-ratepayer funds building out this clean energy revolution, which is so crucial at this point.
Thank you. And for Carina, when looking at customer value or the reason that a customer might adopt rooftop solar and storage, you interact with a lot of customers in Aurora, and you have data on what they're interested in, what they require, backup power, savings on bills. What's your vision? What's Aurora's view of the top motivations for homeowners going solar? And has that shifted? Are there any recent trends that you've seen in that area?
Yeah, I'll highlight maybe two aspects. So I think what is still important today is maximizing the return of investment. So we're still here, and we're still in the conversations that installers are having. NEM3 could really be seen as a vehicle to encourage adoption of storage due to the TOU pricing model. And then what we see is really in markets that utilize TOU, solar plus storage can help that to maximize that ROI conversation. So still having the ability to really have a real conversation around that topic is very important, and it's still a very important shift, and supporting that. I'd say the second point that we're still seeing, people want energy independence. So we still hear it in the surveys that we do. So we do our snapshot surveys very regular. We'll touch about 1,000 homeowners. And what we hear is like half. So half of respondents are still concerned about power outages, and it's mainly due to weather. And they want to make sure, and the other half says, also expressed just concerns about attacks on the power grid. Cyber is a topic. So solar plus storage allows the homeowner to decouple when energy is generated from when it's consumed. And so this is still a real important topic that people want to approach. So yeah, maximizing ROI, energy independence are what we're still hearing loud and clear.
Thank you. And Blake, one way that customers can have a tool in their toolkit to maximize ROI is by employing virtual power plants. Could you talk a little bit about the promise of virtual power plants and how they can help ROI, but also how they can help the grid and the operation of these assets?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, so Sonnen's very proud as a leader in this space, and of course there are a lot of great leaders. But we're doing VPP grid services now in the European Union since 2014, which is kind of like ancient history in the residential storage space. We're really excited about what we've been able to achieve in the US. And again, not just Sonnen, but others in Utah and now in California as we start in California. And it's really cool. So yeah, I mean, the idea is simple, right? The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. It's really the idea that when you are part of a greater swarm dispatch of batteries that are responding to a specific grid service mechanism as a network of batteries, as a single grid asset, that you can perform authentic grid services that actually replace the need for real power plants and real infrastructure. And that's transmission, distribution, mostly distribution infrastructure. So the idea there is to firm up your solar and make it so that it really provides that very clear direction towards energy transition and is no longer in some way considered something that may or may not be super valuable to the grid. Now, why does that matter to a consumer? Well, there is an overarching theme there, and I do think it can sell in the US. It certainly sells quite well in Europe, and we didn't know if it would sell in the US, but it has sold very well, believe it or not, in Utah with Rocky Mountain Power's virtual power plant with us, but now we're seeing it in California. So you have to have a presentation that includes not just energy independence, but also the opposite of that, which is, hey, you're helping to support California's entire energy system and bring less power outages to all. And why not let your battery perform at its true potential and get paid for it? And the idea being that, okay, you're doing something that makes the whole greater than the sum of its parts. You're actually helping to replace a power plant. And by the way, you're going to get paid for that. Well, how do you get paid for it? Well, first of all, there are dynamic grid services, which, as have been pointed out here, are still really limited in this country when it comes to behind-the-meter storage. There's a lot more potential for behind-the-meter batteries to perform more grid services, even in California, where we've only just begun, really. But once you're performing dynamic grid services with your battery, you can get paid for that, and that's cash, which is really nice. And then on the flip side, you have bill management. So proactive bill management that allows you to precisely respond to the price signals embedded in, for instance, a time of use rate, which really has great potential, especially if you consider grid charge as well as injection in a much more holistic story. So when you look at both bill management, so trying to reduce your bill via a very dynamic load shape, as well as dynamic grid services, which has a lot to do with the load shape, but also could have some injection involved, but also could be more around the ancillary services side for very short bursts, as an example, frequency response, which we love. So you put all this stuff together, and what you get is effectively a bill that looks more like that NEM2 value proposition on bill reduction, and also grid services on top of that, which is cash payments. Now, as pointed out, you have to have the regulatory framework to do this. So that's important. You can do it you do okay today in California, but there's so much more potential if the batteries and the solar arrays were unshackled and were allowed to really participate in all of the potential mechanisms for monetization. End of the story is, can this enable a strong distributed energy storage and distributed energy market for solar and batteries? Can it enable that decentralized, digitalized, decarbonized grid? I think it can. I think there's quite a bit of proof points behind that, but it certainly does take policy evolution, regulatory evolution, rate design to do that. And hey, we'll take what we've got now, and then if CALSSA keeps doing their good work and everyone else around the industry, then we'll hopefully have more tools. Certainly the technology can handle it. We can do it. We just need the tools to do more, and we'll enable the industry and hopefully thrive.
Ryan, can I hop in real quick?
Absolutely.
Okay. I couldn't agree more. The potential for virtual power plants is incredibly exciting in California and across the world. There's no question that concept is powerful, and I think we could sell it if we were given that value stacking to pass along to the consumer. But I think that is exactly the problem with California's policymaking right now that we want to underscore, is we basically took away the policy driver for distributed generation and we left nothing in its place. California has a handful of VPP-like policies, but they are in pilot mode at best. It is going to take us years to build that up, and many of the more progressive voices and thinkers in California are looking at VPP, but it's very much at arm's length, or they aren't really truly able to provide the value that DG and extract the value that solar and storage can provide. And therefore the financial value that they're offering to customers is not going to cut it. So this is the problem. It's not a lack of imagination on the industry's part in California or an unwillingness to evolve. We are pushing in that direction. We want us to go there. We need our policymakers to meet us there, put in place the policies that get us to that future, give us that pathway, that transition time to get there, as opposed to the abrupt and, like I said before, reckless NEM 3 decision that is going to cause more than contraction. 80% drop as we head into the dark winter months isn't contraction. That's devastation.
Thank you. And another policy that is, I'm sure, in CALSSA's crosshairs right now is related to that of multifamily metering. Could you talk a little bit, Bernadette, about what that policy is? It was just pushed forward in the legislation a couple weeks. Could you talk about what's involved in that and what that might mean for the industry?
Yes, thank you. Sorry, I don't mean to hog the stage, but it seems to be, the beatings will continue until morale improves here in California. The Public Utilities Commission a few weeks ago proposed going even further on the net billing tariff for all of our multi-meter properties, multifamily housing, public schools, farms, and multi-meter commercial properties. They essentially are setting up a sell low, buy high on 100% of the electrons and preventing these properties from being able to self-consume and avoid high retail rates. This will destroy that market. Even worse than what we're seeing happen to the single family or single meter market in California. We're fighting tooth and nail right now. There was actually supposed to be a vote today. It got pushed off another 3 weeks to November 2nd. And we are quite nervous about where the commission is trying to land this and where they want to go with this very important market in California. And it just is, again, further evidence of this problematic place that we are in, where California, on the one hand, is putting in place very ambitious electrification goals, want to double at least the electricity demand in the state in the next couple of years, have high renewable energy and energy storage needs, greatly outpacing the current market today, whether you're measuring utility scale or distributed, and are pulling back on all of the tried and true programs without putting in place alternatives to drive the market forward in the direction we want to go. And wherever we are today, it's going to take a very long time to put those alternatives in place. What the commission should have done is provided a ramp on NEM 2.0 and put in place all of those alternative policies to catch us as we move in this right direction. They didn't do that, and we are kind of in this really bad predicament. And I'm afraid it's going to set the wrong example for other states. We're already seeing other states around the country thinking that they should follow suit, or being given the opportunity to follow suit, to follow the California path. And I'm afraid, that nightmare scenario has only just begun.
Thank you. Yeah, as is often the case, California can serve as a lesson for other states with policy developments to come. Carina, could you speak a little bit to some other high penetration distributed energy states that are seeing successes right now, and some hot markets that you're seeing in rooftop solar and storage?
Yeah, absolutely. I would also interested of Walker's perspective in here. So what we're seeing again, so we're doing surveys, we're trying to see where we see a bit more demand. And then what I would say, there's the Midwest that we're definitely tracking, and the Northeast are the regions that we're keeping an eye on right now. Interested to also hear what Walker is seeing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, similar to what we saw happen in Europe in the before 2010, like right now it's less about rebates or subsidies. That's very much in the past in the US. It's really about rate design and the retail cost of electricity, right? So the Northeast, traditionally Arizona, has lower retail prices of electricity, but there's a lot of interest in solar because it's very hot. We have to add up all of the different components that lead to that customer value proposition. At Sunrun, we're always taking a look at different states and different markets and looking at where the trends are going. And again, this is why rate design is so absolutely important, as Bernadette said, is that you have to have rate design that encourages the right behavior, especially as we look at batteries in the future, not just in California, not just in Hawaii, but across the whole US, that is encouraging the smart usage of those batteries to inject back into the grid when the grid most needs it. And so we have to avoid policies that damage what will essentially be in the future, again, non-ratepayer funds helping all ratepayers. So, when we look at the US, we don't see the proposals for high fixed charges yet, but as Bernadette said, we're beginning to see some of them, and that is a challenge, especially as we try to balance energy efficiency with electrification, with solar, and with storage. I think that there's a lot on the plate of policymakers right now. Every state has always been different, of course, because retail electricity is different, rate design is different in every state. But we have to take a step back and ask, what's the overall value proposition for that customer that leads, frankly, to non-ratepayer funds being leveraged to get to our environmental goals and to drive the customer-centered revolution.
Thanks. And to build on that, Walker, fixed charges, what would this mean for the industry, for the customer? What is the threat of a fixed charge? And also, what is the logic behind assessing a fixed charge to customers?
Sunrun, our CEO, Mary Powell, she's a former utility executive, to be clear. Like we try to look at this from all angles. We do think it's important that every solar customer, every solar plus storage customer is quote unquote paying for the grid. That is part of it. And that's why when Bernadette mentioned the average fixed charge for IOU territories is around $10 or $11. I think the median's 10, average is a little bit above 11. So I think that's the range that we should be talking about for fixed charges. We should also, to be clear, be incenting, as has been demonstrated in Europe, the injection of solar plus storage back into the grid when it really matters. But if the fixed charges become really high, you're taking away the incentive for the customer to do the right thing with their power, and that same concept would obviously translate into energy efficiency, as it has for some time, which is why environmental advocates have traditionally advocated against high fixed charges in most of the states in the United States.
And Blake, with the onset of fixed charges and other market signals, I've noticed a rise in people wanting to go off-grid or what people are calling grid defection. Could you talk a little bit about why that might be an outcome that could be negative?
It's a good question. I also want to just jump in for a second on a previous point from Walker and from a few others regarding what states are doing well. I just want to put in a quick plug for Utah. I don't think Utah gets a lot of credit for some of the cool things they do and have done, but the WattSmart virtual power plant is really special, and Rocky Mountain Power is paying thousands of dollars up front for anybody who joins, and then paying an annual dispatch fee for grid services every year. And this is really neat. And we're doing 7 grid services right now in Utah, and that's a vertically integrated utility market. So it's a tough one to crack those sorts of things. But if you have a vertically integrated utility that really wants to do something and really wants to create progress, then things can happen very positive. And in Utah, you're seeing, I think, a very strong, robust market, but you're also seeing another interesting market, which is what they call their go-back market. So Rocky Mountain Power pays even more if you add a battery to existing solar, and because they call it firming up the solar. And so they pay quite a nice upfront and annual if existing solar customers are willing to buy a battery. This is just good for the grid. This isn't just for batteries. This is just good in general and good for customers and good for the industry. And so I'm proud to see what Utah has done. And I know it's a small state, but is really kind of neat. On your question regarding grid defection, yeah, wow. Well, I don't know if any of us want to go back to Thomas Edison's day and have thousands of competing grids and a complete lack of logic behind how the grid works, and having everyone go off grid. Let's just say for a minute, who's going to go off grid, by the way? You think low income people are going to go off grid? Probably not. You're going to have a bunch of people with a lot of money going off grid and creating these nanogrids. And unless you've lived in a nanogrid, an actual off grid nanogrid, it's hard to be able to speak about how life with an off grid nanogrid is. Of course, going off grid, truly off grid, sounds cool until you talking about the difficulties and challenges of doing so, which can be usually handled one of two ways. Either you're a very conservative and stoic person and you can handle the difficulties of off grid life, or you have enough money to pump into your nanogrid that everything's fine. Either way, in a world where 1 million people go off grid in California, wow, what a terrible disaster. Now you have all of these people with money off grid, and the entire grid infrastructure is now being paid for by who? Low income people? So I don't know. If the question is, will everybody going off grid be a bad thing? I tend to believe everybody going off grid is probably not the greatest thing, probably going backwards as opposed to society going forward, which is creating a more interactive and dynamic grid for the future.
Yeah, I mean, to follow up on that, we do not want that future at all. We want to be building virtual power plants across the U.S. and having partners to do so. You know, whether here in California we have a partnership with PG&E, we have numerous partnerships across the U.S. that we've announced the last number of years. I think that the reality, though, is that this market is still very segmented. The programs are very small. I think that, you know, we need to look at any state, including Utah, holistically. Like, is there a VPP program? Yes. Is the percentage of penetration still very low in that state? Yes, it's still very low. And we need to understand why. What are the drivers for that customer participation? We don't want a system where it's very hard to participate in a VPP, and there are just very limited amounts of VPPs. It needs to be more open source with rules that are simple to understand for companies and customers to enroll, to drive that type of investment and that type of innovation that will save all ratepayers money on a state-by-state basis. And I think that that's the balance that is really hard to get right now, because, you know, we're constantly looking across the country at these different VPP programs, and if they're all different everywhere, you're not going to scale anything. If there's one program in a certain state that is good for one company or a small segment of customers, that's not really driving the way that we need to drive. And at the same time, the existence of VPPs means that there isn't a general market that real people can sign up for on a daily basis. That's problematic as well. So we have to get this right balance.
The other thing on grid defection that's missing in the conversation, it isn't just going to be driven by high fixed charges and just really anti-consumer policies like that. It's going to be driven by the fact that in California, especially so. You have utilities that are charging more and more for the product that is serving the consumer less and less. People aren't dumb. They're not going to continue to pay for something that doesn't actually work for them. They're going to look for an alternative. And I think even low-income communities are going to be looking for opportunities to create microgrids and other local sources of power that just simply keep the lights on and lock in electricity prices. So, I think grid defection sometimes in some places is sort of a red herring. It gets us talking about the wrong thing. We need to move in the direction of grid integrated distributed energy resources that are a major part of California's clean energy future. If we mess up and we miss this opportunity to transition to that future, I think grid defection is absolutely on the table for everybody, not just the wealthy. And this is something California policymakers should really care about. But more importantly, they should care about, how do we get to our clean energy goals? How do we build 6 gigawatts a year? And how do we get the largest renewable energy market in the state back up on its feet?
Excellent. And just one final question for you, Bernadette. If you were to give some advice to policymakers in other states based on the lessons learned in California, what might you suggest, or what kind of warnings might you offer?
I've never said this in my 20 plus years of renewable energy advocacy here in California, but sadly, I would say do not follow our lead at this moment in time. Look away and care for your burgeoning renewable energy and distributed solar market. And if you want to move us in a direction of greater grid integration and greater grid services, think like a consumer. Provide a pathway, provide real value, and make it something that can be scalable at speed. This is what is imperative for all of our states, California included. Right now, we don't have that leadership, that thought leadership, and that political leadership that we need to get to that future, sadly. But hopefully things will turn around. Just don't follow our lead right now.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Well, unfortunately, that's all we have for time today. I want to thank all of our panelists for this discussion. Really appreciate all the insights today. Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan.
So we just learned about some of the challenges that California has faced in the rooftop solar and storage arena. We've also learned about lessons that we can learn from it. Next up, our contributing colleague and contributing editor, John Weaver, will welcome a panel of community solar experts to discuss that growing market. We have a very short break here, so don't go anywhere, and we'll see you back on the stage at 4:20 Eastern. Thank you.